So let's talk about why men join these motorcycle clubs. I think that the very best way for me to explain why I joined originally is probably with a story, right? So let's get into it. The first time I was ever invited to a clubhouse, the very first time that I was invited to come and hang out, and man, I think it was, well, we'll just say early 2000s. Let's just say that, all right, about 20 years ago. Wow, it's been longer than that. Yeah, anyway. So the very first time that I went to a clubhouse, it was a big party, and I was a very young man. And when I walked in, I didn't bring a bunch of friends. You know, I came by myself, and I brought my favorite motorcycle. And in those days, I owned a few motorcycles, and I brought my favorite one. And I showed up. I walked through the clubhouse doors. I was greeted at the door, and I had a card that I was given, a little invitation. And so they said, "Oh yeah, come on in. But before you come in, let's get the guy that invited you to come to the door so he can introduce you to some folks," right? And in those days, I guess that's kind of how they did things. That's pretty much still how it works. But so this guy comes up and he says, "Yeah, man," he says, "I'm glad you came. I wasn't sure if you'd show up. We got food out back. We've got the party up front, and just enjoy yourself, make yourself at home." And so I did, and I kind of scanned the room, and there was a man that stood, head and shoulders over everybody else in the building. This dude was huge. I mean, you guys remember the movie The Goonies? This guy was the closest living embodiment to Chunk that I had ever seen in my life. Like he was just the biggest, gnarliest, meanest looking man I had ever seen in my life. I looked across the room, I seen this big ugly dude, I was like, oh my God. And I walked straight up to him, and I stuck my hand out, and when he shook my hand, and I've got a big hand, I wear a 3X gloves, and his hand engulfed my hand, like just engulfed my hand. And he looks at me and he introduced himself, and he said, "Who the hell are you?" And I introduced myself, and he says, "This your first time here?" And I said, "Yeah, and you're the first guy I introduced myself to." And he said, "Yeah, why is that?" And I said, "Man, you are the biggest, ugliest, meanest looking man I've ever seen in my life. And I just had to meet you personally before I introduce myself to anybody else. Yeah, are you running things around here? Are you the press?" And he was like, No, I'm just working the bar. And do you want a drink? And I figured out at that moment, that man, I'm not going to say his name. A lot of the people that know me will know who I'm talking about. But that man spent probably as much of his life on the outside as he did on the inside. And he wore patches on his vest that pretty much confirmed that, right? And the reason that I instantly liked this guy, the reason that we just instantly hit it off, was because he didn't try to hide who he was. He was not a wolf in sheep's clothing. He was a damn wolf that you could see was a wolf. He was the kind of man that when you looked at him, you knew that if you double-crossed him or did him wrong, he would rip you limb from limb. He was just, you could see it on his person. And when you looked across the room and you started looking at the men and looking at what they were wearing, the same was pretty much true for everybody. In the clubhouse, for the most part, if somebody's been around for a long time, they don't pretend to be somebody that they're not. Everybody's as real as it gets. You don't find a bunch of wolves running around in sheep's clothing. It's a place for a man's man, where we're not politically correct. We say whatever we want, and we do whatever we want. And that's why we join these clubs, so we can get away from society. It's a subculture, and we do everything that's taboo. All the things that you people look down on, that's what we do. Yeah, and we have no qualms about it. We enjoy it. Peace and love. I'm out.